Go ahead.
So my parents are Japanese-born, Japanese-raised folks, but they play classical music, and they played in St. Louis Symphony for 44 years. I grew up in St. Louis, American, didn't speak any Japanese, but then in my early 20s, I moved to Japan for about 10 years and went really deep. I grew up playing music. I went to Manhattan School of Music as a jazz flute and saxophone player. So I'm a trained musician, but then I went to Japan and really switched gears in terms of my focus and performed with one of the top taiko drumming ensembles in Japan called KODO. And that's where I really studied deeply, Japanese traditional music, Japanese folk musics, Japanese classical musics. And since then I basically combined all the musics that I've grew up playing classical music and jazz, and then all this traditional Japanese, contemporary Japanese music. And so what I do now is kind of a fusion of all of that, mixing and collaborating often with, again, classical musicians, jazz musicians, flamenco artists, and visual artists, and all sorts of different
Somebody comes to one of your shows, what do they experience? What's the experience for the audience? What's some feedback you've gotten in terms of what they've enjoyed?
One person just told me today that I have the most range of any single musician that they know, and this is a very established artist. And they said, and just in terms of the tonalities that I'm able to do, because I'm a multi-instrumentalist. I play Japanese drums, and just the Japanese drums, there's a 3-foot diameter drum that I have, and a smaller drum that I have, and metal instruments, bell instruments, and I'm also a specialist in Japanese bamboo flutes. And so just the range of sounds that I produce and types of rhythms and tonalities, and some of the music is based on, for example, Noh theater, Kabuki theater. These are 800-year-old traditional theater, musics. A lot of use of space, a lot of kind of minimal sounds, and kind of really creating different moods. And so going from very kind of minimal soundscapes to very rhythmic, very kind of sometimes very aggressive, kind of kind of visceral drumming, and then as I mentioned, flutes. So the flutes can be very kind of fast and articulate, and almost like jazz, Charlie Parker, like kind of really from that to very meditative as well. So people will say it's like going on a journey, it's like going on a trip, it's like you're through physical space, traveling to Japan maybe, but also different eras to maybe like a dreamscape. It's and I feel when I'm playing, I kind of do that as well. Like I feel like a jazz musician at times, and then I feel like I'm a Noh theater, somewhere in the ghost world, and and it might even happen within one piece where I go from one to the other.
Wow.
So.
Amazing. Go from speaking here about it to just going.
To going, yeah, exactly.
That's tell me. So the other kind of part B of the interview is talking about keeping spaces like Duck Creek open and free to the public.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if there's any way you can bridge a little bit about your type of music, your history as to things that inspired you, with kind of spaces that mattered to you growing up, perhaps like Duck Creek. Is there anything you can share about why it's important to keep art free, keep art accessible, and keep art diverse?
Yeah. So one thing about my instruments is, Lori, I'm giving an interview right now. Ruin it. And don't stand there. You're gonna make me nervous. What was I saying? Oh yeah. So the drums and the flutes often come from folk traditions. I mentioned festival traditions, and so they're made to be played outside, and they're made to be played for hundreds of people dancing and singing and often forming a large circle. So it's all about community and about reaching far distances for people to commune and gather. Oftentimes these days I play in concert halls and in jazz clubs and a very different type of space. And so for me to be outside, for one thing, and being playing for people, whether free or not, just having this idea of gathering to the sound and moving and communing within the sound of the drums, the sound of these flutes, is kind of bringing it back to the source of where they come from. And so for me it's very important to have places like this, like Duck Creek, where I'm able to kind of come back to my own roots, right, and really be able to communicate with people from all over the world.
All right, thank you.
You know what I mean?
Is anything else that you'd like the audience to know before they experience one of your shows? Is there anything education-wise that would be helpful? I mean, something you could sum up almost that would be inspiring also?
Sure. So I realize that because the nature of my instruments, the Japanese drums, the Japanese flutes, and the tonalities and the rhythms and the sounds of it may be very kind of foreign sounding. And so I spend a lot of time discussing, when I'm teaching, for example, talking about, I mentioned Noh theater, Kabuki theater, these different festival musics. And the more people understand that, the more people are able to understand kind of where the music is coming from. Having said that, you know, this is not a lecture at a university, this is music. And the music that I end up playing is actually not traditional at all. It's mixing, you'll hear more like jazz rhythms or Moroccan rhythms or rhythms from different parts of the world, but it sounds Japanese, so people often just assume it's traditional Japanese. So it's kind of a lengthy answer, but it's if I have only a short amount of time, I just say don't think about it and don't try to analyze it too much, and just, you know, hear the sounds of it and try to understand it on your own terms. But then if I had more time to kind of, you know, talk about, you know, gagaku, which is a ritual, court music from 9th century Japan, you know, and how it portrays the music is the music of aristocracy and of grace and elegance, and so it's rooted, you know, in this centuries, millennia-old tradition, but I'm kind of bringing it out of the past. I'm adding different sounds to it. I'm using like technology to create loops and to kind of affect the sounds of it. So it's a lot of bit of very now and very in the past and everywhere in between. So yeah, going back to it, it's really just opening your mind and just kind of not try to understand it on a intellectual level, but just kind of viscerally and vibrationally just accept whatever. And even if you don't like it, just accept that, you know, just try to think about what it is you don't like. For me, music is a study of culture as much as anything. And so to understand, you know, going a deep dive into Japanese culture, you know, for me, I've also studied other musics from Korea, music from India, music from Senegal, you know, and so just it really kind of, the way people think about the world is very different depending on where the world is. And the more that all of us try to kind of think like other people and empathize with other people and see the world through other people's eyes, it will bring a more empathetic world, a more peaceful world, harmonious world, you know. And that's kind of at the root of what I want to do with the music, or what I'm hoping the music does for people. It kind of expands the realm of what people are comfortable with and accept and understand.
And so I'm hearing you say look towards the past, look towards other cultures, study. Is there anything else you can share to help us with our educational mission educationally for young people who want to become musicians? Anything? Last question. Anything else you'd like to share, just for somebody who's in their teens, 20s, who's pursuing a musical?
Yeah. The deeper you go into any subject, the more you're going to get out of it. So you can go very surface level on any type of music, just learn the rhythms and the harmonies and the melodies and kind of skate by, and you might get very good at that, and you might even get a good career out of that. But the deeper you try to understand the roots of the music, where it comes from, where the different influences have traveled across the world to get where you are, the more profound it will be to you to perform it, and also to the audience, whether they realize it or not. The depth of what you're communicating will only grow. So I always encourage people just to go as deep as they can. You know, not just study with your teacher, but who's their teacher, and who's their teacher, and where did they come from, you know, and try to go further and further and you might learn a song from a person, but where did that song actually come from, and from what culture, and because it often doesn't stop one level away. It can just keep going back and back and back. So, yeah.
I've